E rumani tarangi koutra. Haere ai ka moana roe e kui te whai o tau maramati he marimata. O te mea tu tahi na miki to tātou kai hanga. He nāna ne toho mai te hihe mai nei I tēnei pō. A tēnā koutou ngā tātou tūpuna. I tēnei te mihi, a tēnei wai. A kei te whakahoki ki te wakai ngō tātou mātu I tarangi nei. Hoki atu rā. E nō reira, e ngā tātou whānau. E toru rau. E waru tekau. Kei roto. E tēnā te whānau. E te whānau taratahi. Land-based training. Hara mai, no mai. O tēnā, I te kaupapa, Lakes 380. I tēnā te mihi. E te whakahaere mai, no mai. E hoki mai rā, I te koutou. Ki te moana, kei roto o Onoke. E Onoke. E te tamaiti tēnā o Wairarapa moana. Ara, kei konei rā. E rere rā. I te wairua o te aua rua mahanga. Ara, e rere rā. Kei konei rā. I te moana a Raukawa. Tēnā te maunga. I te maunga a tuhirangi. He tuhirangi tēnā te pau o te tātou tupuna. Ara, kei konei rā. I te pai maunga a aorangi. Kei konei rā. I te whānui. O te marae. O kohanui I te rā. Tēnā koutou. Haere mai, no mai. First of all, I just want to welcome you all here to this wonderful occasion. When I look at the of our mokopuna, our tamariki mokopuna who are here today, this is for you to take on board, for you to acknowledge our roto, our wai, because a lot of you whakapapa here. You may be from Te Oriori, you may be from Papawai, from Tūmape here, from wherever in the Wairarapa, but you still whakapapa here. For here in this lake is where a lot of things happen. To the north of Wairarapa, Kahununu came down into Wairarapa. But here, Kahununu came here and exchanged their waka so the rangitane could go across to Waipunami. And it was done here. And so Kahununu gained the land that is here. E nō reira e te whānau. Nā mihi ki a koutou. E te whakahaere mai, no mai. Ki ngā roto o Onoke.
To the hau kāinga, karanga moi. Thank you for the call of invitation to be a part of this. When we have a look over here, one of the reasons we're called tangata whenua is because we have a whakapapa to our land. And so what's our whakapapa here? And then if you're a descendant of the land, what's your responsibility? And so it's kai tiaki because that kai is a person who does something, and the tiaki is caring. So what's our role in caring for the environment? Can it be understanding the environment a whole lot better than we do?
Kia ora. My name's Rees, and I'm a lecturer at Victoria University of Wellington, and I'm here to talk about how we collect these lake sediment cores. What a lake does, regardless of whether or not we're there, is it records the history. So it's a sentinel on the landscape, recording that history. The more and more I interact in these types of environments, I kind of think about this notion of reciprocity. This lake is serving to provide this great feature that we can tap into. So how do we pay the lake back in terms of the favor that it's providing us for free? And I think, these days where we come and we talk and we share that knowledge, we're actually celebrating the history of those lakes. I think it's kind of a beautiful notion to think there are these historians all throughout New Zealand that are archiving this stuff, writing it down. And to give back, we've got to celebrate those histories by coming together and sharing what we know about these things. So I can talk to you a lot about these little insect remains that are preserved in those archives, but I can't talk to you about the value of the lakes or the people living on those lakes now. So everyone's learning in certain respects, and I think it's very useful to think about how we can give back to these environments.
I grew up on this lake, around this lake I should say, but I grew up on the Te Ranganui River, which is the last river you cross coming down here, the last bridge. Back in those days, our kai was very plentiful. I mean, very plentiful. There was no net, just to throw the net out there and you've got some flounder or whatever kai that was in there. Same with the Te Ranganui River. The Te Ranganui River, which flows into this lake, we used to get whitebait, we get kura, we get inanga, tuna. But I look at it now, my heart cries because all I see is a stream. There's nothing. There's nothing.
So this is our sediment core. It's basically gravity and human operated. So these tubes, and then they're kind of tightened into place, so they stay in place. And when you're lowering this thing through the lake water, this valve comes up so water can be flushed out, and you lower it into the sediment, and the weight will let this barrel enter the sediment. And then effectively you've got this other line, watch your fingers, and you just hammer it in. And we aim to get somewhere around 1 meter, 2 meters, aiming for the last 1,000 years of that history. And yeah, that's how the magic's done.
So once we collect the cores, we'll just go through a bit of a demonstration of how we open them up and look at them and think about the history they contain. So here, for example, in the Wairarapa and in other lakes around this area, being so close to things like some of the fault lines, we can also get records of earthquake signatures in some cases. This one here from Lake Punui, which is just across the way in the foothills on the other side of the valley. We know that here we've probably got just on 1,000 years of time. We see a lot of changes in the colour of the mud here. This is a lot finer. It's representing some erosion coming in from the catchment. We know that the timing of this is around when humans started to enter the landscape. There's little black flecks and chunks in here. That's indicative of some of the charcoal that's trapped in the lake core. The charcoal was a result of burning in the landscape and plants burning, and then that smoke and charcoal and ash falls out into the lake and is recorded there. We also find evidence of things growing in the lake. So there's a little layer here. These are the remains of kakahi, the freshwater mussel shells, present and layered in the lake through time as well. So we can look at how taonga species such as kakahi have changed in their abundance through time, through the lake, whether by finding their shell remains or using some of our environmental DNA techniques. As we come to the top, we can also start to investigate how any of the farming and landscape changes associated with that may have influenced the lake system. So these are some of the things that we can look at and investigate using these different things trapped in the mud through time. So, such as the insect remains that Andrew talked about, the pollen. We also have technologies that can scan the core and capture the signature of the chlorophyll trapped in the mud core. Now the chlorophyll is the pigment that's in anything that's green in the plant form has the chlorophyll in it. So that's an indicator of growth and productivity. So the main one we pick up out of these mud cores is looking at the chlorophyll put in there by algae and bacteria. So we can track that and see how that has changed over time. So even at the bottom of this little bit here, there's a layer of little bits of organic remains, so possibly bits of twigs or maybe bits of aquatic plants that have died and been trapped in the mud. So those are some key things we can use for understanding. If we can identify what the trees or plants are, we can understand that they were growing either in the lake or around the lake. But a key part of this is that provides us something to date, to radiocarbon date, to get an age on it.
So yeah, colour is one of the ways we would describe this. We kind of feel it to see the texture of the mud. So this, yeah, like I said, if it was really fine you could roll it into a ball, but this breaks apart. You can smell it. Sometimes you can smell things like sulphur, which gives you an idea of some of the things that are happening in the lake.
Lake Mackay, which is by Lake Onoke.
Like.
On top of the hill near Lake Onoke.
Not much of a distinct smell, I'd say.
I don't know what of.
See them, they were explaining that they were putting the core jar down into the bottom of the lake and sort of like hammering it in with the weights, and then they pulled it up and we could see some of the sample that they brought out. So it's quite exciting actually to see that. Yeah.
A core from here versus the other side will be quite different to each other. So it depends on what is your question you're trying to answer. And for this mahi, we're trying to answer the question of what's the general history and the health of the lake over time. So we don't want it from right close to the edge. We want to sort of get as much of the lake story as we can. Rightio. There is a clay layer here, and not exactly knowing what that might be related to, but one thing we hope to be able to get, as I was saying to somebody before, is an expression of when the Royal Mahanga was diverted, and what that's done to the deposition and the history of the lake. So one thing we might see there is that if the Royal Mahanga first was feeding into Wairarapa and then coming through, it should all be more clay in this lake than coarse sands. But now if the Royal Mahanga is coming straight through, we might expect coarse sands. So it would be something like this that we would expect to see as a change associated with that diversion. So we launched on the Lake Ferry Township side of Onoke, but that's also where the Royal Mahanga River comes through, and the force of the water coming through into Onoke takes the fine mud and clay with it and moves it on out through into the sea, and it just leaves behind the coarser sand and gravels. So if we're trying to take a core to look at the environmental history, that's not the best spot, because all we just get is a big core of sand, and it doesn't contain all of the information we want when we're trying to build our story. So we chose to go on the far side. It's a quieter water, the mud settles out a lot better.
What's unique or special about these more estuarine or lagoon type systems as opposed to your, more landlocked lakes?
The lakes. Just from cultural and historical settings, they are a big place of Mahi for a lot of people. They're a focusing point as well. So understanding their history is a key part of our work as part of the Lakes Reality project. But they do provide a challenge. They have got that mix of sea influence and freshwater influence. When we were pulling up our anchors, for example, we found hippies in the mud. They were still alive, but they're very, very soft-shelled, for example. They can't develop in the same way as they would if they're in the salt water, where they've got a lot more calcium for their shells. So they're an interesting transition between the land and the ocean, and they tell a different story, but they're of such a significance, and there are a lot of lakes around the country, but there are less of these lagoon systems, and they need their story told as well.
Seeing these young people here today, and hopefully to influence them that it's not all about having a good time and stuff like that.
No.
It's about their future. I look back at the whanganui, the people from Whanganui, Te Awa Tupua. I look at how from a baby they're learning about their awa, they're learning about their whenua and their waka hui. You know, I want to see that here, so that we're out on the lake with our mukapuna.
We're both from Lake Onoke. Our roots are tied here.
I remember riding the horses out here and catching all the whitebait and doing the fishing, so it'd be nice to think that we can give back and hopefully get our beautiful taonga.
Put our kai pu taiao lens on,
Yep.
which is a new learning for us both.
Yeah.
A big part of us being here is to approach our mahi in a different way, where it becomes more practical, it becomes hands-on for our rangatahi and our mokopuna.
Water is everything, eh? I think our kids, we need to really educate our kids on, being connected. For me personally, I'd like to move more into that direction, kura taiao type stuff, getting our kids reconnected, learning to grow their own kai. Tētahi moemoeā, that's one dream that I have for sure. Yeah, get our kids involved.
Well, I'm home after 25 years of moving around and thinking, what the heck am I doing? I need to come home and add value and contribute right here. And what a beautiful spot.
Mauri ora.
Mauri ora.